by its nature, all of these narrow broadcast technologies, they rely on forcing the story. I thought of ideologies as fragmentary mythologies. That's where they get their archetypal and psychological power. But in the postmodern world, and this seems to be something that's increasingly seeping out into the culture at large, you have nothing but the tyrannical father, nothing but the destructive force of masculine consciousness, and nothing but the benevolent great mother. It's an appalling ideology, and it seems to me that it's sucking the vitality, which is exactly what you would expect symbolically. It's sucking the vitality of our culture.
I've been a journalist for 16 years. In the newsrooms of the BBC and Channel 4, and then making documentaries. I moved away from the front line of news some time ago, started learning psychology, which is what first drew me to Jordan Peterson. From a distance, I've started to see the blind spots of the establishment media much more clearly. I spent some of the best years of my working life at Channel 4 News, and have a huge amount of respect and gratitude to the programme. But if we can't have open conversations about the kind of topics Peterson is raising, we're in serious trouble.
My book went up to number 2 on Amazon.com in the US the next day, right? It's number 1 in Canada. It's number 3 in the UK. I couldn't have asked for more publicity. And so I could also be sitting back and saying, well, you know, a person who regarded herself as my ideological opponent tried to go after my philosophy and my reputation on national TV, failed brutally, and has been taken apart for it. It's like, this is a good day. This is a good day. But I don't regard it as a good day. I don't think it's a good day. I think that it's evidence of the instability of the times that we're in. It would have been much better for me and for everyone else if what we would have had was a real conversation. We're playing with fire. Things go wrong in cultures all the time. The polarization increases until people start to act it out.
Peterson is one of a new breed of thinkers made famous almost completely by the internet, not the broadcast media. Part of a powerful new informal network being called the intellectual dark web.
The mainstream media is based on an old dying model that is being replaced by new media and new technology so quickly that its faults are becoming glaringly obvious. Fortunately, thanks to YouTube, podcasting, and however else you get shows like this one, the mainstream media's stranglehold on information, which really is a stranglehold on your ability to think clearly about the issues of the day, is crumbling at an incredible rate. Now the question is who and what will replace it? A few months ago, one of my favorite people to sit across this table from, Eric Weinstein, came up with the phrase intellectual dark web to describe this eclectic mix of people from Sam Harris to Ben Shapiro to his brother Brett Weinstein to Jordan Peterson, all of whom are figuring out ways to have the important and often dangerous conversations that are completely ignored by the mainstream. It's why I would argue that this collection of people are actually more influential at this point than whatever collection of cable news pundits you can come up with. If you think I'm being hyperbolic about the growing influence of this group, just check the traction that these people get on Twitter or Facebook compared to our mainstream competitors. Twitter may not be real life, but it is some barometer of what the zeitgeist is right now.
What unites this group of thinkers is a sense that the set of ideas that have run Western culture for years are breaking down, and that the chaos of the moment is the attempt to find new ones. It's nearly all happening online.
Part of the problem that that we have right now in our culture is trying to diagnose the level at which the discussion should be taking place. And I think the reason that this is a tumultuous time is because it actually is a time for discussion of first principles. First principles are virtually at the level of theology. First principles are the things that you assume and then move forward. It's like, well, what should we assume? Well, the dignity of the human soul. Let's start with that. You can't treat yourself properly without assuming that. You can't have a relationship with another person. You can't stabilize your family. You can't have a functional society. So what does it mean for the human soul to have dignity? Well, part of the idea is that you're participating in creation itself, and you do that with your actions and your language. And you get to decide whether you're tilting the world a bit more towards heaven or a bit more towards hell. And that's actually what you're doing. So that's a place where the literal and the metaphorical truth come together. And people are terrified of that idea, as they should be. It's a massive responsibility. Orientation is biological temperament, far more than people realize. So, for example, liberals are high in a trait called openness, which is one of the big 5 personality traits. And it's associated with interest in abstraction, interest in aesthetics, interest in abstraction, interest in aesthetics, interest in abstraction, interest in aesthetics. And they're low in trait conscientiousness, which is dutifulness and orderliness in particular. Whereas the conservatives are the opposite. They're high in conscientiousness, they're dutiful and orderly, and they're low in openness. And that makes them really good managers and administrators and often businessmen, but not very good entrepreneurs. Because the entrepreneurs are almost all drawn from the liberal types. These are really fundamentally biologically predicated differences. You might think about them as different sets of opportunities and limitations, and certainly different ways of screening the world. Each of those different temperamental types needs the other type. Let's call this a diversity issue. If you start understanding that the person that you're talking to who doesn't share your political views isn't stupid, you might be talking to someone who's more conscientious and less creative than you if you happen to be a liberal. But that doesn't mean that that person's perspective is not valid, and it doesn't mean that they wouldn't outperform you in some domains, because they would. So one thing to remember is people actually do see the world differently. It's not merely that they're possessed of ill-informed opinions. The whole point of a democracy is to continue the dialogue between people of different temperamental types, so that we don't move so far to the right that everything becomes encapsulated in stone and doesn't move, or so far to the left that everything dissolves in a kind of mealy-mouthed chaos. The only way that you can navigate between those two shoals is through discussion, which is why free speech is such an important value. It's the thing that keeps the temperamental types from being at each other's throats.
Such a shock to most of the media, one of the most widely shared analysis pieces is from Deep Code. It describes how the establishment, mainstream media perspective, based around liberal values of openness and inclusivity, he calls the Blue Church, is being challenged by a new web-based insurgency, a red religion, based on the values of tribalism.
The culture war of the 20th century was decisive success for blue. Effectively a route for red. What we see first is that red was forced to move into a deeply exploratory phase. Second, that it did this in a context where, as it turns out, things were changing meaningfully, quite significantly, in a world historical level. The emergence of entirely new forms of communication, and therefore entirely new forms of sense-making and coherence. history, these groups have actually always commingled. They're necessary, but they actually relate to each other in a deeply healthy and direct fashion. Their separation into armed camps is extinctionary, actually.
What are the values of Red that you think Blue needs to integrate or to reintegrate?
Oh, that's actually pretty easy. Responsibility. I mean, we've actually even seen it. The ability to make a commitment and keep it. Responsibility, both the individual and the group. The ability to actually really make a personal sacrifice on the part of the group. Human beings can only actually make sense of the world by virtue of communication with other human beings. That one must have a mixture of order and chaos. The way, the Taoist way, is the alchemical admixture of order and chaos. If you bias towards orderliness, you find yourself in a rigid, non-adaptive, non-creative, non-exploratory framework, which will die because the world changes. If you bias towards chaos,